Hey, folks, and welcome to the Typology Podcast. We're happy that you're here, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. I'm Anthony Skinner, and before we go any further, I would like to introduce our host, Ian Cron. Ian, how are you doing?
I am doing mighty fine. It's a beautiful day here in Nashville, Tennessee. It's about 73 degrees outside. The sun is coming in. I got my kids here with me. My adult children have decided to move from New York to us. My other one and her husband are thinking about coming here from San Francisco. Which would mean we would have 3 dogs. No, we have 2 dogs, and we're about to get a puppy. On June 3rd, we're getting another dog. So we would have a puppy, 2 dogs, our 3 adult children, and their partner and husband. So that's going to be fascinating, isn't it?
Well, anybody who comes at this time is going to want to stay because we're having West Coast weather. So it's perfect, right? It's
right?
Amazing.
It's right. Yeah. I keep telling my kids, get out of San Francisco and get here fast,
That'll be fun to have them around. Well, hey, we want to let everybody know that we have got some exciting news. We are moving our podcast to YouTube. We're still on our podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify and all those places you can find the podcast. But we are now on YouTube where you can actually watch the show. You want to speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this for a long time because one of the things I know as an Enneagram teacher and practitioner is I learn a lot about people's types from how they dress, by their facial expressions, by everybody has a certain energy that they really radiate. I mean, let's just face it. A 7's energy is a lot different than a 1's energy, or a 2's is different than a 5's. And man, to be able not just to hear these different types of people that we're blessed to have in the studio with us, to hear their voices, but to see their faces, and you learn twice as much about that type in their lives. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, we do. We have so many cues that you see that we don't speak. So, well, we want to tell everybody to go to youtube.com/C/IMCRON for Ian Morgan Cron. And also, if you just go to YouTube and just type in there Ian Morgan Cron, you're the first one that pops up, of course. So we'd love to have you join us on the YouTube channel, and make sure you subscribe to Ian's channel. And then also, we have a special right now on the IEQ9. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we have a lot of people who aren't sure of their type or want to get a deeper, more robust understanding of their type. And so we have this IEQ9 assessment. If you actually just went to my website, ianmorgancron.com, you would see a tab for the IEQ9. If you, another way, ianmorgancron.com/assessment. And if you enter the code EP, so like Edward Peter 2020, you get a 20% off on that IEQ9 assessment, which
great.
Is a fairly meaningful savings. So
yeah, that's really great.
You have it.
Awesome. All right. Well, you want to tell us about our guest today?
Yeah, man, I'm excited about these people. I don't know them, as is often the case when people come on, but when I read about who they were, and I took a look at their upcoming book, I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting, right? Mm-hmm. So Jeffrey Olrick, a psychologist, his wife, Amy, he's a 9, she's a 2. They're real familiar with the Enneagram, both deeply appreciative of it. They have a new book called The 6 Needs of Every Child, Empowering Parents and Kids Through the Science of Connection. And we just have this really remarkable conversation around, oftentimes how we as parents ask ourselves the question, what am I supposed to do? What can I do right now,
right,
with this child of mine? When really the question is, who am I supposed to be? How can I be with my child right now? Yeah, and they go through 6 different needs. And what we discover is the relationship between those 6 needs and these different Enneagram types. And it's just a rich conversation. It's a fantastic conversation.
That's great. Well, let's go ahead and move to the podcast now. And we'll welcome Jeffrey and Amy Olrick.
Jeffrey and Amy Olrick, welcome to Typology.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here.
We're really happy to be here with you.
You are our first guests from New Zealand.
Yes, it is a long way away.
And sometimes we're surprised to be here ourselves.
Yes.
Wow, I bet you do. You're actually heading into winter, aren't you?
We are. It's autumn here, and the days are getting shorter. So it just feels very. We've been here almost 3 years and still getting used to the seasonal switch.
Oh, I bet.
It's very weird to be thinking it's a May and it's getting colder.
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess that could play with you a little bit.
Yeah.
That could play with you a little bit. Well, we're so delighted to have you on the show. We want to be talking to you about your new book, The 6 Needs of Every Child, Empowering Parents and Kids Through the Science of Connection. But before we do, I want to really actually first ask you about your experience with the Enneagram and how it came to be. And Jeffrey, I'm also interested in your perspective on the Enneagram as a psychologist, and which is a question I ask of psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health workers all the time. So, to you, tell us about your Enneagram journey.
Okay. Well, the Enneagram has been really meaningful in our lives, and I discovered it about probably 2.5 years ago, probably from a friend's post on social. You know how these things get shared, but we had recently moved to New Zealand, and it was after a job change, and I was really just looking at a pattern of myself where I was just wanting to understand why I did the things that I did, why I felt like sometimes other people reacted to me the way that they do, and just feeling like I was ready to get healthier. And so the Enneagram really came into my life at the most perfect time. And it seemed so obvious. I kept taking the test because I wanted to be sure I'm that kind of person, but I feel like I'm a pretty strong 2. And really just trying to figure out about this overgiving thing and getting redirected back into learning how to love myself. And then I can more healthfully love other people. But that's been the journey for me over the last couple of years.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and Amy passed that on to me, what was going on for her, which was exciting, within our relationship. But as a psychologist, I can't help going to the place of like, especially as a child psychologist, one who's interested in human development, thinking about, how do we get there to those places? And assuming and expecting that things are multi-determined, that it's not just genes or just environment, but because parenting is where where I myself sit so much in helping families, thinking about in terms of the needs that children have, and we've written about in our book, how does meeting those needs in different ways or neglecting certain of those needs push people towards these types, which was really exciting to think about. So I do a lot of traveling. I'm on the road serving rural communities, and I would listen to listen to your podcast and really reflect on these things. So it's been a real pleasure to think about the intersections of children's needs and the Enneagram.
So I want to get to. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Amy, what were you going to say?
No. I was going to say it was, and I just think also personally, it's been interesting because that was, again, I'm so much about the interpersonal relationships. So you kind of latch on pretty quickly to you being a 9.
Well, yes. So I should point out, of course, as the psychologist, we like to diagnose ourselves as well as everybody else. So I zeroed in pretty quickly on 9, which felt like that made sense to me, given as a therapist, much of my work is therapy and working with individuals, families. I've done couple work, and I've always gotten that feedback that I think 9s get, that I can hear 2 sides of a story and both sides feel like I'm on their side. There are unhealthier parts of that which drift more into my personal life or more intimate relationships, but that part really resonated for me.
Yeah, 9s and 2s both make great therapists. They both have, challenges. You just mentioned one. As a mediator, oftentimes psychologists who are 9s will be able to see everybody else's perspective except their own. And when they can't see their own, they're not able to sort of land the plane and say, okay, well, here's the problem, and that also happens because they're trying to avoid conflict and disconnection in the room. And twos, of course, where you can start to run into trouble is by overgiving, and by actually not having your own feelings. But if you were a therapist with your client in the room, you might tend to begin having their feelings instead of your own.
Yeah.
Which can, be very problematic if you can't, discern what's happening in the moment when you're being with people. But boy, you all have such great gifts for being in the helping world, and I'm glad that you are. So what have you learned yourselves personally about, because we've just actually we've done this series on parenting for Instagram and on YouTube, our YouTube channel, and just gotten tremendous response, because people are just trying to figure it out. I often have sat up at night, but when my kids were younger, and I kept thinking to myself, are we doing this parenting thing right? Or should I start laying money aside now for future therapy? I mean, there was always that element of self-doubt and wondering, and of course, as life went on, I realized that it was enough to be a good enough parent. I didn't have to be a perfect parent,
right.
That said, is there anything you've learned from parenting, not only from your work in your book, but from the Enneagram?
Yeah, that's really interesting because when we had this opportunity to explore the issue more directly, I kind of circled back to look at my type and Amy as well, and think more carefully about that in regards to parenting. And what both of us, I think, found, and Amy can speak to her side of it, was, and would love your feedback about this, really, is I think I'm a 9 with a 1 wing. And what I noticed in reading both is that when I'm being mindful in my healthy 9, I parent with the ability to really sit and listen and hear everything, but also have some boundaries and move things forward. But when I get unmindful, and there's not the issue of disconnection, it's just sort of the busyness of life, I kind of slide over, I think, to my 1 wing, where I'm just kind of rigidly wanting to, judge in a certain sense how things are going or how my kids are doing. But if there's disconnection, if that's an issue that's kind of bubbling up, that's when I can slip into my unhealthier side of 9. So I thought that was interesting to think about how 1 wing actually had some components of my parenting that were relevant in a lot of day-to-day sense that weren't necessarily, wouldn't have thought of immediately just thinking through a 9 lens.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a 1 parent?
Yeah, I think my mom had 1 characteristics for sure. I don't know if she was a 9 1 wing also.
Yeah, I think 1s, children who grow up with 1s or people who have strong 1 tendencies kind of swallow their inner critic whole, and they don't have the same maybe the same level of volume that it does for a dominant 1, but you sure can pick up a lot of those qualities. And if you have a 1 wing, you could just have what we call a heavy 1, a heavy wing, so that it's almost hard to tell, am I a 9, am I a 1, or I'm ping pong back and forth really easily. Some people have weak wings and strong dominant types, and so it's less the case for them. It seems to me that, like with 9 parents, a lot of times the struggles they have to do around merging with the lives of their kids rather than differentiating and becoming their own person apart from them. Obviously, it's pretty easy for an unself-aware 9 to be too permissive with kids, lenient for fear of conflict, saying no,
right.
And just building healthy boundaries is generally hard for 9s, as it is for 2s. So what about you, Amy? What have you learned from the Enneagram about your parenting style?
Well, again, it's the same really fascinating question, because I wouldn't say, and this could have to do with our childhood, but setting boundaries is not hard for either one of us. In fact, I find that I think I'm a 2-3 with a 3 wing. And I think that when I parent my kids, then the 3 really resonates more with me. And I don't know whether that's a closeness issue, where that's actually more of my my truer self coming out in these close relationships, and 2 is kind of a social construct. I mean, I'm fascinated by I've heard that often women lean more towards 2 because we've learned that in certain ways. And I love how you say over and over again, I think in your book and things that I've heard you say, is like, these are not definitions for who you are as a human, I think, in our work. And it sounds like in your work, I'm really fascinated with what does it mean to be human entirely, right? And we all have these components, but I do find myself being more of a 3 in the relationship with the kids. So even being aware of these different types, and I think, oh, now is not the time that I need to be worried about their, how they're appearing. Now is the time for me to go into loving them and being my
healthy too. I think that when you're healthy too with them, present with them, that's where your 2 actually is a real strength. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Hey, Anthony.
Yeah.
I've been working on my latest book, right?
I do.
Well, part of my process is researching topics related to my content.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, there are tons of resources out there. So let me tell you about one of my ultimate life hacks.
Please tell us.
It's called Blinkist. If you haven't heard of it, Blinkist takes the best need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books and condenses them down into just 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. I like Blinkist because it quickly gives me the main points of a book, which helps me evaluate which books I want to make time to read in full later and which ones to prioritize now for the projects I'm working on. And since Blinkist works on my phone, my tablet, or in a web browser, I use it anywhere, whether I'm traveling, making breakfast, working out, you name it. I've listened to and highly recommend Daniel Nettles' book, Personality, and Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. I love both of them. You can even read or listen to the key takeaways from The Road Back to You by yours truly.
I like that.
With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. All the books you want, and all for one low price. Now check this out. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our typology audience. Go to Blinkist.com/typology, try it free for 7 days, and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/typology, that's TYPOLOGY, to start your free 7-day trial. And you'll also save 25% off, but only when you sign up at Blinkist.com/typology.
I'm not an Enneagram practitioner who thinks that these numbers define who human beings are. That they are sketches, light sketches of what the interior world of different people may be and what it's like to live in their shoes. But I wouldn't want to go so far down the road as to say, it's some sort of magical system that is going to parse perfectly the interior world of every human being on the planet. Life will not cooperate with that kind of reductive thinking. Right. So I try not to go there at all, So tell us about your book, because I want to jump in and talk about the Enneagram a little bit alongside of your book, and where there might be some intersections and some common wisdom that we might find ourselves illuminating each other and our perspectives.
Yeah. I think as I've thought about it over time, I think there are two kind of levels at which you can look at it. The 6 needs really compose a whole, which are grounded in the science of attachment, human attachment, and the development of human development in the context of what those patterns are early in life, which aren't fixed. People change in their attachment securities over time, but we tend to stay centered around certain patterns. And when I think about Enneagram, and one of the things that really appealed to me, whereas most personality typing things kind of I dismiss because they're rigid, right? It's like you're an ISTJ, and that's kind of it. Doesn't give you much room to move. The whole idea of moving healthier and unhealthier within those types and across into different aspects of our humanity is really makes good sense to me. And so when I think about moving up and down, I go right to security of attachment, where I think when we have had secure relationships growing up, we're probably more likely to end up in that healthy side of whatever other things are contributing to our Enneagram type.
And one thing that struck me when you were talking about lying awake at night wondering, are you doing all this wrong? Because I think that's the question that all of us ask. I mean, we come home, however our children are delivered to us, right? You're holding this person and you're thinking, like, what do I do, right? And so I think that what I hope that our work with the book, and what I really believe what you're doing with Enneagram, is getting people to change the frame of that question. Because I think there's a much better question to ask, which is not what do I do, but how should I be with this person, right? And so Enneagram, and I hope the 6 needs, are a way to look at people individually and say, what is this person about? And then who this person is. So this child of mine, who is sometimes hard for me to understand and reacts to the world much differently than I do, what does that say about him? And then how can I figure out how to love him when I have a true understanding of how to love myself too, or who I am? So that's a real overlap that excites me, to think about changing the frame of that question to how do I be?
And within the, breaking things down further, those 6 needs are really components of what we are designed for in terms of thriving. But each person is their own person. And so some of us are naturally going to need certain of those needs attended to more directly or in certain ways. And our parenting, where we come from as individuals, is sometimes going to mesh with that. And sometimes it's going to be really hard. And I think both Enneagram and just understanding what the components of human development, what we need, helps us think through, where can I step next with this child in this moment? So,
oh, that's beautifully said. I like that. The question Anthony hears me ask all the time is, what does love require of me in this moment? And when you consistently ask yourself that question several times a day, going into conversations, listening to people, and in the back of your mind, especially if an emotion comes up that's afflictive or, squirrely or whatever, I stop and I go, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but what does love require of me in this conversation or in this moment? Because maybe I'm being triggered by something. I don't have time to think about what it is in this moment, but I'm just going to go with what love tells me to do. Right. And so, I think I mentioned this earlier to you guys. I've been fooling around with this idea of the Enneagram, which I think parallels something that you all were just saying. We all grow up with needs we all come into the world with a need for safety and security, right? We have food, shelter, warmth, protection. We all come into the world with a need for esteem and approval. That's that mirroring aspect, I think, that as the mother gazes into the eyes of the child and the child's eyes gaze back, it not only validates to the child that they exist, the child is being beheld and told, you are beautiful. We hope, right?
Yeah,
And pretty much I had a friend of mine, a graduate school professor once say to me, pretty much everything in the DSM that's not rooted in biology has to do with what happens when that gaze between the mother and the child is interrupted or is not there, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very fascinating sort of insight. So, and then maybe that third need would be for a sense of mastery and control. I can affect the environment. I can change the world around me. And as I look at the Enneagram and those three triads, it seems to me that 2s, 3s, and 4s have issues, perceived or real deficits around approval and esteem.
Yeah.
And those strategies they develop are to get esteem and approval. Mm-hmm. So then if you have an 8, 9, and a 1, you have issues, really perceived deficits around mastery and control.
Yeah.
And so those strategies there that you see are ways of, getting those needs met in adulthood. Right. And obviously for 5, 6s, and 7s, perceived or real needs around safety and security growing up. Therefore, they develop strategies to get it in adulthood, and in ways that are often, in all 9 cases, do precisely the opposite.
Yeah.
They actually thwart our efforts thwart our ability to get those needs met. So what are the 6 needs? Tell me the 6 needs that children have.
So there's 6 needs. And one way I think about them is there's 2 sets, and they relate to our human instinct to move out into the world, to discover, to master it. When things feel safe, when there's not distress in the environment. And those needs are delight, support, and boundaries as we move out into the world. But life gets hard. It's stressful and distressing in particular ways, especially relationally at times. And so we also have this instinct to pull back into a refuge, and we're designed in relationship and for relationship. And so that means going to a person who's there to protect, to comfort, and what we call equip. So those 6 needs can be thought of in terms of going out and moving back in. Mm-hmm. They can also be thought of and paired just as you described into these kinds of needs. Delight and comfort are, as you mentioned, mirroring needs. They are the needs we have to be seen and not changed, just held or enjoyed, to be present with. And then you have those mastery needs, which are support, because when we're going out into the world, help me figure this out. How does this work? And then you have equipping, which is an emotional guidance need, which is, what do I do when things are really upside down for me emotionally? And then you have boundaries and protection, which are those security needs. I've heard you say before, when we don't have boundaries, it actually is quite anxiety provoking for us. We need to know where the limits are and the consequences of our actions around us. That grounds us. And then there's some times where we just need someone who's bigger, wiser, and stronger to step in and take charge when there's real danger. When that doesn't happen, obviously that can have pretty significant consequences for us.
And then in our book, we've arranged the needs into a compass to kind of show that the movement of it, how we go out and we come back, and there's this natural give and take. And sometimes it's hard as parents because we just don't understand what it is that that our kids are needing from us. And one thing I was thinking about is, as I see myself with my kids, that 3 part of me that comes out and wants for us to appear like we're together, and we're just genuinely not together much of the time, right? So I go to support, like I go to that, like, this is how we do it, this is how your bed should look, or this is how your homework should look, or this thing. And then I can, when I can use the Enneagram to say, oh, I'm doing that thing that I do, then I can go to the compass and say, where else could I go? Like right now, that's one direction that I'm always running to, is this like over supporting, wanting them to look or be a certain way. I can move to delight, or I can move to comfort if they're struggling, or I can move to, so it's this overlay of, all right, I think we can get stuck in thinking that there's one way to go and feel hopeless. So our hope is with the 6 needs, and especially in putting them in the compass, is this idea of moving, is just saying when we get in these moments where it's hard to know where to turn, there are options. And I think it can really equip us.
Yeah, like as a 9, if I'm feeling like connection is at risk, I just want to shut it down. I want to make it go away. And I can do that in different ways. I can withdraw and just check out. Or I can just try and shut things down and make the discomfort go away, because I'm, in a parent-child relationship, I have kind of a power that I can make that happen. I recognize that's my unhealthy side of 9, but the 6 needs point me to where I really need to go instead of going that direction, which is slide into comfort and healthy boundaries, because that's what's really going to help us stay connected. I can just get through this moment of disconnection.
See, I love this. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, I love everything that you just said. And I love back to what you said earlier about the question is not what do I do, but how can I be with this person?
Yeah.
And it excites me because thinking about myself as a parent, for me to delight in my child who is a 7, it looks totally different than to delight in my child as a 1, or my child who's a 6. So to understand, myself as a 4, and then how I can be with each one of those, and I can't wait to read your book, but it informs how I would interpret the word delight, how I would interpret, how protection and comfort, because those things look very different for different people in different numbers.
That's right.
Love that. Yeah.
And the hope is, it is so exciting. That's so exciting to me. And the hope is that even putting it into a compass is that, I don't know, and I want to talk to any moms who are particularly listening. We get this message, like even how we're talking, and I don't mean this in a bad way. This is the frame that we've been given, is like the mother's gaze, and whether or not we're like smiling at our kids is going to determine their future forever. That's not, trust me, I know that's just all the parenting books I've ever read, and it makes me feel so overwhelmed and so this idea of the journey, I think Enneagram does this so beautifully, and that this is a journey, and we're gonna disconnect and come back together. And it's about this. It's about realigning our compasses. In the compass in the book, we actually have 2. The pointer is split in 2 because the kids are it's gonna need one thing, and we're gonna need the other. And it's really up to a parent to figure out how to align. But it's a lifelong journey. And if we start to ask ourselves that question, how should I be with this person? We can start to envision the future with them. And we can start to think like this moment when they've been screaming for 2 hours at bedtime because I have not adequately loved Big Dog. I have not expressed my love for their stuffed animal adequately. Okay. Like these things happen, and there's like no way through it, but through it. Right. But like, then you start to see, but there's this long-term life with them. And so today was terrible. Like today was a terrible, terrible day, and my gaze was not loving. But like tomorrow I can try again. And this 6-month period with them might be super hard, but like we're going to keep realigning. We're going to keep figuring out who we are together.
Hey everybody, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute counseling session. And this is why some people can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for a long time and never really get anywhere. This is why I'm such a believer of intensive counseling and my friends at Restoring the Soul in Colorado, created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Now listen, if you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough, you need to get in touch with my friend Michael and his extraordinary team of counselors at Restoring the Soul. If you're looking to get out of the rut you're in, but can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation with Michael's staff. Call 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can help you. As a special bonus, just for Typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships.
sounds like a lot of what you're talking about here is the need for parents to live in sort of a place of self-compassion a lot of the time. I grew up in a very difficult home. I came into parenting ill-equipped, really inexperienced. The only way I could say is the way I came into parenting was I knew what not to do. Based on experience, I knew definitely what not to do, right? But I had no idea of what to do, my kids survived our mistakes, and they often heard us say we were sorry for our mistakes, and they've heard that as adults, and I think what I meant by the mother's gaze and mirroring, which also happens with fathers, is that nobody in this broken planet, nobody does that perfectly. It's just impossible, right? And otherwise we'd be in Eden, for crying out loud. And I think one of the beautiful things, as a person who identifies as a person who deeply believes in God, I think that part of the journey is handing our children over. I think there's the opportunity for our children to experience a profound mirroring with God that can do a lot of repair.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what I missed, God, whatever I missed in that mirroring process, I sure hope you can convince my child that they're safe, that they're loved, and that they have control and mastery and freedom. Yeah. So, that's the good news in this whole discussion.
Yeah, and it makes me also think, one of the things I hope that comes across in the book is that when we're talking about your children, which is kind of the hook, we love our children, we want to do right by them. But recognize as we describe what children need, it sits alongside of these are human needs. Like you had these needs as a child yourself, and you still have them now, and you have a story around those needs. And just like Enneagram invites you to reflect on that story and bring it forward, that's what we hope with the needs, is it helps people develop that reflective capacity, which is a hallmark of secure attachments. But for so many of us who didn't have those, that's something you have to work toward, that reflection, to consider what does it mean to have not had a mom or dad who really paid a lot of attention to me, or other things that maybe weren't met for an individual. And that's right, it's a journey, and have a lot of grace. We would use the word for the journey, and patience, I think, can really free people up.
Something that really freed me so much was, I don't know if you feel like talking about this strange. So Jeffrey's a certified coder in the strange situation, which is this attachment protocol. Is there any way to talk about that briefly?
Please explain attachment theory to us in the next
it's just so fascinating.
60 seconds, if you would.
But just say what the thing is, then I'll tell you what I'm finding fascinating. Explain the strange.
I could nerd out on.
No, don't nerd out. But just so explain what the situation is, and then I want to say what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so maybe I would start here. Most of us tend to orient to big ticket items in our histories, like that, but really they often don't tell you the thing you need to know. And when researchers, a woman, Mary Ainsworth, was trying to put scientific empirical feet on this idea that there's a bond that a child has with a caregiver that is designed to do certain things. And there ought to be differences between couples and how that goes. And those differences could be meaningful for understanding human development. She needed to develop some strategy to stress people out, but not so much that we just end up not really being able to tell the difference. between one child or one couple and another. So strained situation is just this device where a parent and child are put in a room to play with toys, to explore from a context of safety. Ooh, this is fun. And then you start stressing the kid out a little bit. You bring a stranger in. That's for a young child like, okay, hold on. What are the, it needs language. What are the boundaries? And is there protection here? Am I safe? And then you leave the child alone with that stranger, which kind of ups the ante a little bit more. And then you bring mom back and see how they walk through that distress to their relationship. And then you repeat it by leaving the child alone and then bringing mom back again. And so there's that little tweaking of, that's everyday life, these moments where we get disconnected in just little subtle ways, and we have to negotiate reconnection. And some couples really struggle with that, and some couples muddle their way through. And that whole idea of good enough parenting is really important. Like, you don't need perfect parents. You just need to find your way from disconnection back to connection.
Right. And this is where, okay, so this is the part where my mind just like explodes with like hope and joy about being a mom. Because so the first couple of years that we were married, 2 or 3 years, Jeffrey coded. He was doing all kinds of, so he was a coder of these interactions, often high risk families. So he is an expert at like, okay, how do the child and the parent, do they glance up and look at each other? Does the child look away? Is there a little smile on their lips? It's like, there are all these different ways to code secure attachment. And as someone who can, when I'm under stress, really think about how do other people appear, my thinking was that for that to be a successful experiment, the child would have greeted the stranger when they walked in. The child would have happily played with the toys. When the mother came in, they would say like, oh, hi, mom, kind of thing. That's not the sign of security at all. The sign of security is the parent realizing there was stress involved, and can they come back together? Like, does the child even like look up at the mom and go in for a hug? Like, it's not, I don't know why it's, so I don't know if I can articulate how much it means to me that it's not about how our kids appear or whether they achieve or what they're doing, what they think we should do. It's whether or not we can come back and embrace after harm has happened. That actually sets the stage for all of their future growth and development, mentally, physically, emotionally. And that's really exciting to me as someone who has that achievement view.
Yeah. I've often, can't remember, but I think in many ways, raising kids is oftentimes just teaching them how to steward their own suffering. Because it's inevitable. And part of what I hear you saying is that part of the answer to that is coming back, right? It's about restoring connection. Yeah. I wanted to say these 6 needs again. One was delight, right? Which is essentially, I see you. The next was support, right? How can I help? Another one is boundaries. How far is too far? Protection, meaning are you safe? Comfort, which means I see your suffering. And equipping, which is where to from here, right? It seems to me that different Enneagram types would do some of those tasks a lot better than others, right? Like, I mean, it's pretty clear. I can almost go through those 6 things and go, oh, well, I'm a 4. I really do comfort well. I see your suffering. I'm pretty good with that, whereas, I'd say in some ways I'm not very good. Probably, I'd say I'm not great with how can I help? You know what I mean? In some ways, I'm much better about how can I sit with you in your suffering than I am at how the heck do I get you out of it? Right. I mean, I can do it, but I have to burn more calories in order to do it, right? So do you see a parallel there too? Have you kind of thought to yourself, well, gosh, maybe I think certain Enneagram types are better at some of these skills or providing these things or being these ways with kids than others?
Absolutely. And you think about also the healthy versus unhealthy sides of that, right? So a self-aware would have gotten to that place like, oh, this is familiar territory. Let me show you what I've learned in this suffering place. what the options are from here. And so that becomes an equipping thing that you
Right.
move into that piece, to move forward with some hope rather than just wallow in the four,
Right.
just of emotional piece of it. There's interesting ones. Like I'll bring up 7 because that one really compelled to me. Most of these, or I think a lot of these will align in pairs in terms of what comes more easily and what is harder to come by. It's interesting to me, the 7, usually delight and comfort go together. They're mirroring needs. It strikes me that a 7, for instance, would be very comfortable seeing you when things are sort of like good and okay, like, keep it positive. But that
Right.
if there's pain involved, seeing that and bringing comfort to that would be very uncomfortable. So, I think that they're interesting combinations for each of these types, where you would recognize, oh, I'm very familiar with that. I can roll with that. The challenge will be when you see something that's, oh, I can do that. The question is, but do I put it in overdrive? Because one of the things that most people probably would need to wrestle with, we're so tuned to thinking more is better. And for the needs, for the most part, except delight, most of those needs are in their sweet spot when it's enough, but not too much. When we bring too much of that thing, we actually, we inhibit our children's autonomy and development. So some things we're going to be like, I just don't even recognize that need. And some I'm like, I'm going in there hard. So that would be a good example. I think with 4, you could probably come in hard with comfort, but then get lost in there, not be able to get out.
So this is very Enneagram centric sort of thinking. When you over rely on your superpower, it becomes your kryptonite.
Yeah.
So, if you're a 2 and you're really great at, let's say, support, right? If you throw that thing into overdrive, it becomes smothering. It becomes, you're actually trying to get your own needs met through meeting the needs of your children.
Right.
I always say, I always tell 2 moms or dads, be careful don't confuse flattery with words of encouragement. They're 2 different animals, and oftentimes 2s will use flattery as a way of gaining appreciation, which is about getting their own needs met. But I love how when you look at if we were to feather these, if we were to lay these sort of 2 systems down, the Enneagram and these 6 needs, I think it'd be fascinating to work with them a little bit, and as parents to know, okay, well, as a 2, I can do all of these, right? I mean, I to some degree, I can do all of these, but I'm really good at these 3 or these 2, and my partner is really good at these 2 or these 3, and it's sort of like, how do we negotiate what we're really good at? I may be very good at support, and I'm pretty good at delight, actually. But my wife may be much better at, I think, protection. And so sometimes I defer to her judgment, you know what I mean? And say, okay, in this moment, what love requires is protection. Now I can do that. I can bring it 30%. My wife can bring it 90%. So I'm going to kind of support her in that effort in the moment, if it's possible, in a perfect scenario. Is that kind of how you envision parenting? Is like where you have 2 people, hopefully. I realize that there are families where there's a single parent, but where it's like, you start to learn each other's superpowers and kind of leverage and maybe defer is not the right word, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's like saying, you got this. I'm going to let you take the wheel on this one. Yeah. Is that how that works?
Well, it's certainly an advantage one has if you're well paired, in terms of your relationship, if you're co-parenting with somebody. Because I can think of a lot of times where I just have to step out because I can't do the thing that I know my child needs, but Amy is equipped to. And again, a lot of that comes down to where am I on my scale in terms of my health within my, in this moment, I'm not a healthy 9. I just want it to be, the distress to go away. But Amy's got, and oftentimes when we see each other struggling in our types, it kind of calls us forward. And we do that tag team. I need to step up to my healthier version because I can provide that need now. And when we're at our best, a lot of days we're not at our best, when we're both in the unhealthy versions of ourselves. But yeah, it's a wonderful gift to be able to have to hand over to someone who can move into that space.
And it's interesting too. I just think even knowing, just like Enneagram, knowing these types and thinking about them, knowing the needs, just having some of the options limited, so having these 6 choices and thinking about them is so helpful. And what you were saying, Ian, just this idea of the tag team of it, it made me think of a night where it was just gone so late and one of our boys was struggling and you came in and I think it was a hard week at work. And he was just wiped out. And I was wiped out too, but not as wiped out as he was. And he says, I don't even know what he needs right now. I've gone through the compass. I don't know what he needs. And I was like, I know what he needs. I could see that he was so tired. I said, he needs comfort.
Yeah.
It was let me do it. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it. And it took another hour, but it was done. What our child needed at that moment, we could provide it. But it is that, so it's that.
You moved into that healthy too. You were like, I need to step into my healthy too.
Yeah, just because I saw him struggle. I mean, families are so complex, right? And also when we're doing it on our own, I just find that for me, limited choices are helpful. And so to be able to tick through these things in my mind and think, okay, let me try this direction. Oh, I tried that direction. That went terrible. Okay, I think this is it, is really, really helpful to us.
So what's it like for a 2 to be married to a 6? What are the dynamics to that?
Oh, to a 9?
You mean to 9?
I mean, to a 9. A 2 and a 9. What's that like?
I am incredibly fortunate to be loved by this guy. I don't know how I don't know. I just feel like I would be curious to know more about 2s. I can be very up and down. And I think that steady 9-ness of him, just always seeing. I do think as we've been married for almost 22 years, right? No, yeah. 22 years. I don't know, somewhere in there.
After 20, don't worry about it.
But I do think I've had to get healthier. To see what you talked about with the 9s not knowing themselves. I think because because you give so much in your work, and the kids require so much, I think for him to say, this is what I need, and for me to start tuning my mind into what does he actually need and making space in the relationship to hear that, I think that's, as our relationship has moved into health, that's been a pretty important part.
Yeah, that's probably the growth point, I think, or I perceive the 2-9. I need to step up and kind of own a thing. And Amy needs to step up and sort of not jumping in to manage what's sensed, emotion I'm having.
Or if he says something, to not take it as, this is such a 2 thing, not take it as a criticism. I've done something wrong. Right. It's more like, no, he just has something that has to happen. It doesn't reflect on me really at all. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm very grateful for a 2 because it's somebody attending to me in that good space in a good way. That's really healing for me because I grew up in a home where I often felt a little bit lost, not seen. So a 2 will see me, but communicating about what do I really need? Well, she can't name that for me. I've got to name that for myself and be okay with maybe how that's going to go for her, which that's her side of managing. What am I going to do with that? Just give into it or also assert her own needs. So that 2-9 can be tricky, but it's also healing, I think, for both of us, the healthy parts of it.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had a chance to, I read sort of a précis of the book. I haven't had a chance to actually, dive into the manuscript and read it page for page, but I'm looking forward to it because just what I did read of it, I was reading it thinking to myself, gosh, this really would be a wonderful ancillary work for people who love the Enneagram to read this book, or parents, because there's the internal logic of what you're talking about syncs up with the Enneagram pretty well, and I would say to people too that this is good information, even if you have grown children. I think I'd like to see more books written about relationships with adult children. I know they're out there, but I think many people struggle to figure out how to navigate relationships with older kids. I have kids in their 20s, and so I think about it all the time. And really, my kids still need equipping, comfort, protection, boundaries, support, delight. They need all of those things, just in a different way. It's not going to be like when they were 5, but parenting it doesn't end when they turn 18.
That's right, and culturally, I think we're primed to think of parenting as a job that begins and ends. Right. But that doesn't acknowledge the reality of our design, which is we're designed for relationships that have continuity. Mm-hmm. And what does it look like to think about from the beginning or earlier on, like, this is a lifelong relationship I have. It has different demands at certain stages, but the continuity of it is I'm in this intimate relationship with this cool, interesting, wonderful, and also imperfect person. And right. I'm those things too. Mm-hmm. So I think you're exactly right. It's pushing back against just that frame of like, what do I do now? Well, that's not what a relationship is about. It's about how do I be with this person in this point in time.
Yeah, I love that. It's a good place for us to end. And I just want to encourage everybody to check out the 6 Needs of Every Child, Empowering Parents and Kids Through the Science of Connection, written by Jeffrey Olrick, Ph.D. Might as well throw on the credentials there. And Amy Olrick, a 9 and a 2. I think it feathers so nicely. Well, first of all, with our having just recently done an Enneagram and Parenting series, for those people who want to do a deeper dive into the subject, this sounds like a perfect book to do it with. And I think what people are going to do is they're going to make natural connections between their types and the things that you talk about in the book. And I'm super stoked. How do people learn more? Tell us what your website is, what your socials are, how people can learn more about what you're doing.
Oh, great. Thanks. So the book is coming out on June 9th. So it's coming out next month. And you can find more about the book at the6needs.com. And then we have, our website is growingconnected.com, and we're on social at Growing Connected.
And I'm on Twitter at Jeffrey Olrick, and where I'll talk, explore different issues in psychology and child development.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, y'all, we've only had 40 minutes together, but I'm already a fan. And
big time.
Big time. And I love what you're doing, and I hope our folks will take advantage of it when the book drops in June, in the middle of your winter, in the front end of our summer. And we really wish you all the best and in everything that you're doing.
Well, we just have really loved being with you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah,
yes.
You bet. Well, friends, y'all know what I'm going to say now. I'm going to remind you of the words of the great Oscar Wilde. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Until next time, we'll see you.